Let's keep rolling here. Line number 10. Hello, Peter Whittle. You're on the air.
How you doing, Paddy?
I'm all right, bye. How are we going?
Oh, doing all right. By a rare occasion to chat. I'm trying to give you a call.
I'm glad you did.
I was been listening, I guess, and reading a lot of this comments related to the storm after Randy Sims' comments and responses and stuff on Open Line earlier this week with regards to, I guess, attitudes and some regard to Aboriginals in the province. And I was just sort of thinking, put something in perspective. Not so much of an argument, is that we are. We consider ourselves of European descendancy in this province, and that, we celebrate our Irish and our French and our English and our Scottish roots and our holidays and everything else. And I don't think that we really realize just how big the Aboriginal segment of our population has the potential or is in Newfoundland and Labrador.
I read your blog post. I think you completely exaggerate the numbers, Peter.
Well, these are not my numbers.
Yeah, listen, no one can tell me there's 75,000. I just don't believe it. 65,000 applicants to the House.
I'm not arguing that there's 75,000. What I'm saying to you is, when you put it into perspective, and the thing is, in 1970, before 1972, there were no real natives on the island of Newfoundland that were considered under the Indian Act. They weren't eligible for registration.
Right.
But since that time, you got the Halifax Agreement right now, and this is the incredible part. I can't get my head around this at all. You go from expecting 11,000 people to join the Landless Band, and they have 65,000 people apply for it. Now, do you believe there's 65,000 people that legitimately are descendants of a Mi'kmaq ancestry in this province? That's what you're saying. No way, it's not possible.
I don't think it is.
Okay, but let's just say that you take those 65,000, then you look at Labrador, then you have a population of 1,200. The Métis have something, the Labrador Métis, Nunavut have something like 6,000 members, and the Inuit in Labrador have another, 2,200 members, and you add all that up, you got 75,000 people who are claiming Aboriginal status or roots in the province. That's 15% of our total population. That's quite a climb from zero, basically, who tried to claim that, especially on the island, pre-1972. And this is the thing that amazes me. And as an example, I listen to commentators and friends and family and other people around. They talk about, where are all these, blue-eyed, light-skinned, Aboriginals coming from all of a sudden, right? And then I sort of think back on it. We have a history in this province of these areas of the province where people settled, and they obviously married or took up with Aboriginals and then started having children. And, Paddy, just as an example of not believing the 65,000 people, I grew up in a little outport in Fortune Bay, Newfoundland called St. Bernard's. And I wouldn't have known or thought there was an Aboriginal to be found on that side of the bay or anywhere close, in terms of any history I had. And then it turns out that, when you get into the genealogical surveys and studies and stuff, that, in places like English Harbour East and Terrenceville and St. Bernard's, that 60%, 95% in Terrenceville, 80% in St. Bernard's are of mixed Mi'kmaq ancestry. Like, I found out that my grandmother, Elizabeth Saunders, or my great-great-grandmother, was 100% Native. Never discussed it with my family, never knew about it. So this is what I say, when these numbers sound exaggerated, we wonder why they're exaggerated. Why is it that there was such a I know racism, it seems like the wrong word, but there certainly was a stigma attached to being associated with being a native or anything like it, so I don't think it was discussed much.
Well, fair enough.
The West Coast, the Jackie-tars, the term Jackie-tar on the West Coast, I almost fell out of my chair the other night. I was reading a book by Harold Horwood from 1970, and he said, the Jackie-tars are fascinating qualities of American hillbillies, including a fondness for homemade liquor, a proclivity for taking fish and game by any convenient method, legal or otherwise, in or out of season, a tendency towards sexual freedom and sexual hospitality, even at tender ages, and a healthy distrust of the law. Like, when you think about it, there is a sort of I hate using the word racism, but just this sort of just this belief that we're distrusting these numbers, but that these people were not the same as everyone else because they were Aboriginals. It was like a dirty word or something, and it just even Harold Horwood, who wrote in my generation, in 1970, how far we've come in terms of recognizing our Aboriginal heritage, and I think it's just because we're discovering it now and exploring it now is worth having the discussion. I mean, what benefits these people of this far generation down the road should have, I think that's a separate debate, but I think we have to acknowledge that we do have a fairly significant Aboriginal history in this province that for generations we've ignored or said didn't exist.
And that's fair enough, but, and I'm glad you hesitate to go straight to the word of racist or racism when you make those references, because, I mean, if there was Irish people Catholics wouldn't marry Protestants, and that didn't make anybody, Protestant haters. It was just part of the taboo of a lot of eras, and thankfully eras that are gone by, and mixed marriages and all that stuff. I don't think that the chants of racism that are going on here now are legitimate at all.
I don't particularly think they are either, and that's why I'm saying, look, there was no doubt about it. There was intermarriage with descendants of European settlers on a scale that I wouldn't have thought possible.
Right.
I would never have thought I was part of it.
Yeah.
And I know now that my great-great-grandmother was a full-blooded Mi'kmaq from Bay d'Espoir, and that family moved out of Fortune Bay and went to the Bay of Islands in the early part of the 20th century. But I mean, there was church oppression in the form of forbidding Mi'kmaq language and abolishing the office of chief and not allowing them to continue in their culture and stuff like that. And as a result of that, there's generations that completely buried it, just put it right out, just buried the fact that they actually were descendants of native groups. And we had the same thing in Labrador, where the Labrador Métis fought for years to be accepted. The only difference between most of the people on the south coast of Labrador who claim Aboriginal descendancy and those north of Lake Melville is they happen to live south of Lake Melville. Their blood's the same. Who they descended from is very similar. And, all I guess I'm saying, and I'm not making an argument that anyone deserves this or anyone's being racist or not being racist, yep, is that we have to acknowledge the fact community and ancestry in this province is significantly higher than we ever thought it was, and that, these people who are talking about the roots, these people are just discovering that they had these roots, and we're all just discovering it. And that doesn't mean you rush out and all of a sudden everybody's going to have these benefits and they're going to get their tax-free and all this sort of stuff. I think we have to be logical in our approach, but we can't deny the fact.
Nobody is, though, Peter. Nobody is denying it, and nobody's fighting it.
Well, you denied it right off the bat. You said there's no way those numbers can be that high.
Well, put it this way. I know personally.
If you don't want to accept the reality of the way we settled our province, then how can you deal with it? It's potentially 15% of the province is Aboriginal. That's incredibly high. Don't you agree? I'm not saying it's a fixed number. It could only be 13,000. I'm just saying. That's a lot of people to believe.
Well, there's a big difference between 13,000 and 15,000, Peter. So to immediately tell me that I disregard the history of the province and the ancestry of people in it, and then tell me that there's no difference between 13,000 and 15,000, just makes the argument kind of silly. And that's where I'm going with all this stuff.
The decision is going to be made on what percentage of Aboriginal blood is in this province by groups outside of me. But I'm saying to you is 65,000 people in this province or 70,000 people in this province are saying they have Aboriginal roots.
What's your point?
My point is that 15% of our population feel that they have an Aboriginal history. And my point is, you can't ignore that, Paddy. You can't just shove it off to one side and say it's not the case because the history book said for the last 200 years that there wasn't Aboriginals in Newfoundland, that we killed them all off with the Biatis.
But who's ignoring it and who's saying that there's anything wrong with it? Like, that's what I'm asking. What's your point? Are you just doing this for general knowledge, or are you aiming it at somebody?
My point is, as I said, I'm not really making an argument so much as I'm saying to you, people need to realize, or at least they should realize and be told, that this isn't something that just came out of the blue, that there is a strong Aboriginal community in Newfoundland and Labrador that many people didn't even know they were part of. And it's not just people suddenly trying to get on a gravy train, it's just you're just learning about your history and your heritage. I always celebrated my Irish heritage. I mean, I love it.
Come on, man. You're telling me that there are some people that are applicants inside of this Halibu Mi'kmaq band who are doing it to celebrate their history and their cultural and their traditions? Are you seriously? Is that what you're seriously saying?
Well, I'm saying they're just discovering because they didn't know they had it.
Okay, so the fact that I know someone personally who has been given his status, who couldn't care less, and that only did it for any benefit associated with it, that makes me what?
Well, it doesn't make you racist.
No, of course it doesn't. It makes him an idiot. It makes him a nuisance and an abuser.
You're saying he's an idiot. How does it make him an idiot?
Because he laughs about it, Peter. He laughs about it openly.
He may laugh at it, and that's too bad, because you know what?
But
that I would have an issue with myself.
But that's what I'm making an issue with, Peter.
I'm not laughing, and I think it's very serious, and that's the point I'm trying to make, is because a lot of people look at situations like that, and that's why they're saying, hey, this is off the rails, this isn't fair. But I would argue, or put down, or whatever the case may be, what's wrong with claiming your rights at some point in time in the future, if indeed they exist? All I'm saying is, you can't just write it off that they never existed.
I don't have a problem with any of this, though. Once again,
I do have an issue with people like you do, if they're saying, hey, I don't care if I'm Aboriginal.
That's the point I'm making. I have no problem with anybody celebrating their Aboriginal ties by getting the status inside the Halifu Mi'kmaq, being Innu or Inuit. None of that. I have no problem with any of that, period. So when we start talking about how the money is spent when it ends up in First Nations hands, you're racist, and then I have to know that I got this.
That's not right. You should be able to question any of that. Now, you and I aren't disagreeing on that. We're agreeing on everything. I'll just say one last thing to you.
Okay.
Let's say that your great-grandfather or your great-grandfather owned half of Bay Bulls, and it's been your land forever, and someone decides, you know what, I'm going to put a marine supply base down there, we're going to expropriate that, we're going to take that from you, you got no rights to that. Yeah. Are you just going to take a stand and you're going to say, no, my family's owned that for generations, that's ours, we should see a return on that?
Well, considering I'm an Irish Catholic, some of which in my ancestry were shot dead for being Irish Catholics, couldn't own land, couldn't vote, treated like peasants, but what? But what makes it different for me?
How do you feel about that?
What do I get for it?
Well, my family's Irish too. My family's straight from there, and lands were seized in Ireland. That's how we ended up here.
Damn straight. And the same thing happened when they tried to squat in around St. John's and had to make hightail for St. Mary's Bay.
So all I'm saying, that Paddy, is that you have. I'm not arguing what you're entitled to, what you're not entitled to. I'm saying, that there is a much larger descendancy of Aboriginal history in this province, especially in ancestry, than we could ever imagine. I mean, even the Aboriginals on the west coast of the Halifu Band were expecting 11,000 people to come through, and 60,000 put applications in.
That's right.
You would never think it's possible. And of course, here I am saying that to you as somebody who's part of a family who had no idea they were part of it. And there's like 250 descendants from my great grandmother that can claim Aboriginal. It's stifling that amount of Aboriginal blood exists in Newfoundland and Labrador. I never would have thought it from the history books growing up, and that's the only point I wanted to make.
Me neither, and I think it is. I'm really surprised with the numbers. Nor do I begrudge anybody in there who's doing it for what I would consider bona fide reasons. If you're doing it like this idiot, who I know personally, and we have lost our friendship based on it, he's laughing in the faces of the rest of us who are paying for him to do what? To abuse the system? That's my problem. I have no problem with anything else. That is my distinct problem.
And I didn't even want to get into that today. I just wanted to talk about the fact that let's just look at the numbers and the history, and that is a much bigger part of our culture than we've ever accepted it to be, because we've been so European-centered, right?
I totally understand, and we'll see where it all lands, but there's also a long way between realizing that you have Aboriginal ties in your gene, and it finds out that you get your status. How do you treat it? What sort of relationship do you have with your historical ties? What do you do to celebrate the culture or tradition?
Yeah, exactly.
Or what do we actually owe you because of that? There's legitimate conversations.
And of course, the decisions on what's owed to people and everything else is not at that individual level, of course. This is all based on, of course, agreements that were made going back hundreds of years with the Crown and Supreme Court decisions that have been made, particularly in the last 20 years. Indian rights, that Native rights, that maybe, this is where the interpretation comes from. Now, whether people take advantage of that opportunity that presents itself, as individuals, and how you judge those individuals do it, I mean, I think that's up to everybody. But at the same time, to deny people something that the courts have said they're entitled to, that's a different thing, too. But, I mean, it's as wide as it is long, and it's certainly an interesting debate.
Peter, but you can't even have the conversation, or certainly we can't in our seats in here, because as soon as you say it, you're a racist. It's
I think
so stupid and it's so pathetic.
I hope I don't get said. That was my problem. Like, I listened to Randy the other day, and I thought, well, as soon as you challenge someone on it, you're a racist. That's foolishness.
Absolutely.
You got to be able to have a discussion and a debate, and people have different opinions on it. You're not saying to someone, oh, you're this, you're that, because you have native blood.
Nope.
You're saying, hold on now, we're talking about your entitlement. Are you entitled to these entitlements because of something that happened 400 years ago or 300 years ago?
It's a reasonable conversation to have.
I think it's a reasonable conversation to have, and you and I don't have an argument about it. I certainly couldn't disagree with anything that you're saying in that regard. I just want, like I say, to me, what's most important is being able to have a discussion without getting emotional about it, and look at the historical realities and how much the realities have changed. I mean, when Harold Horwood wrote that, and I can speak to this because when I went to Stephenville in the 1980s to work in radio, you called someone from Bay St. George or Jackie Tar, boy, those were fighting words.
Yeah.
And now things have changed. People have adopted to the history. They're trying to go back to the old ways. Same thing in Bay Despair. Now, how real is that and how realistic is that? I can't speak to that. I'm not really going to even go into it. All I know is that the history books have changed. A lot was glossed over, and people have a heritage that they need to explore and look at. And I'd encourage people to look at their own family trees and just see, really, where do we all come from? What are we all about?
Absolutely. Well, why would anyone oppose that thought? I mean, that makes complete sense to me. And but that means that when we do that, we have to be open to having the legitimate conversations without those who are in their own self-defense and lack of contribution to the conversation immediately go to, you're a bigot. Yeah. That is where the conversation gets lost. We concentrate on these labels as opposed to coming up with fundamental, reasonable, rational conversation about who is who, what do they get, why do they get it. Modernized treaties, as some of them negotiated in the 1700s, some modernization of recognizing the realities of life today.
13. This is not the same era of the Royal Proclamations or the truck system and the Mi'kmaq and everyone else in the past.
That's right.
And I mean, that's another discussion another time. But again, I just wanted to at least add to the discussion to say, look, you've got to be able to have a discussion. And listen, let's look at our history a little bit different than we have, because as Eurocentered as we are, if 15% of our population, and it could be 10%, as you say, it could even be less, but if 15% of our population feel that they have Aboriginal ascendancy and heritage, that's something we have to look at.
I totally agree, and it's wise points. I've enjoyed the conversation immensely.
I've enjoyed it too. I've got to run and get back to work.
All the best. Take care. Bye-bye.